Hi, everyone. It's Thursday. I'm Vineet Brach here in the CBC Vancouver newsroom, and here are your top stories this afternoon. Well, it's been nearly 1 month since the Lapu-Lapu Day tragedy, when a man allegedly drove his SUV into a crowd of festival goers, killing 11 people and injuring dozens more. Well, now the city of Vancouver is beginning to relocate some of the memorials near the scene. It says items will be moved to a temporary memorial at 43rd Fraser Street and another at Mountain View Cemetery nearby. It says this work was done with VPD Victim Services, who are in contact with families and cultural organizations. And it's to help support healing, safety, and accessibility of roads and sidewalks. Filipino BC says for some, it's still difficult to see these items being consolidated.
We're taking a victim-centered approach, but I could say, just watching it, it is very difficult. It hasn't even been 4 weeks, and we have to remember the families of the victims are still feeling an immense amount of grief right now.
The city says the items that are perishable and that have dried or wilted, like flowers, will be composted, and anything posing a safety risk, like broken candle holders, will be disposed. It also says that it has a schedule to maintain both memorial sites. And Canadians should also soon find out if there will be another major postal strike. Canada Post and its employees, they still haven't reached an agreement after the company's latest offer. Now, job action could impact millions of businesses again. And among those watching closely is Karen Hoekstra, who runs a skincare company. She says 90% of their packages are delivered through Canada Post.
So we're facing big corporations that can do same-day shipping, and we can't do that. So now we're scrambling to find, I'm personally hand delivering local deliveries right now just to make sure that our customers are getting the products they've ordered. I mean, last time it cost us a lot because our shipping costs literally doubled last time. And so if this drags on for, an unknown amount of time, it could really hurt us financially.
Now, weekend delivery has been a heated topic during negotiations, and so has the use of part-time workers. If a tentative deal isn't reached by tomorrow, workers could strike for the second time in 6 months. And crews are battling a large apartment fire in Prince George as of this morning. It broke out near D.P. Todd Secondary School around 6 a.m. Flames coming out on top floor of a 3-story building, and the fire has burnt at least half of the building's roof with substantial damage that's visible, as you can see here. 50 people are out of their homes, with 2 people taken to hospital in stable condition. The cause of the fire is still unclear. An update from the city is expected shortly at 1 p.m. Police say crime in downtown Vancouver has dropped since a specialized task force was deployed 3 months ago. They say that additional officers are now stationed in Gastown, Chinatown, and Hastings Street as part of the so-called Task Force Barrage. It aims to reduce crime and respond quicker to incidents. The department says data that's collected between February 13th and May 13th shows that violent crime has dropped 13% in the downtown east side, 13% in Gastown, and 26% in Chinatown, and 14% in Strathcona. It says residential break and enters have also declined in the downtown east side, Chinatown, and Strathcona too. And that's what we have for you so far. I'm Vineet Brach. You're watching CBC News BC. Up next, BC Today. See you soon.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Vancouver police say public anger about repeat offenders is valid in the wake of an alleged sexual assault in Stanley Park. The accused was previously convicted in a 2020 case. The politicians have promised action on repeat offenders, but what is actually needed to stop the cycle? That's up first. After 12:30, the summer job hunt kicks off amid tariff layoffs and ongoing uncertainty. You can call in with your questions and your tips for job hunters to our panel of employment experts. I'm Michelle Elliott. Welcome to BC Today. A warning for our audience now. We are continuing to follow a story about an alleged sexual assault that took place at Second Beach at a change room in Vancouver this past Monday. Vancouver police has charged 35-year-old Ronald Hartley Duckhorn with sexual assault by choking, sexual assault with a weapon, and unlawful confinement. The accused was previously convicted of sexual assault at an incident near King George SkyTrain station back in 2020. Now, the conversation brings up concerns around repeat offenders and the release of violent offenders. BC's Attorney General Nikki Sharma spoke about that on the early edition this morning, and she says she's eager to work with BC's federal counterparts on the criminal code in order to prevent reoffending.
I'm going to be looking to propose changes to the criminal code that will make sure that if you are a repeat violent offender, it's not just reverse onus provisions that work on you. There are other things in the system that judges have to consider. Respect for the law, the repeat offending, the impacts on the community of that individual, so we can ensure that this terrible cycle of people that are repeatedly causing harm and violence is ended, and the system has better tools to do so. Question about bail, about why is it that violent offenders are released. There is a respect for the law aspect that I'm going to ask for the federal government to look at. So when somebody is repeatedly breaching probation, repeatedly breaching court orders, essentially talking about what their conduct should be doing, there should be some sort of escalation. In my view, there should be an escalation in detention and punishment for that individual instead of a repeated cycle of release.
That's BC Attorney General Nikki Sharma speaking this morning. All right, we're asking you as well, what do you think needs to be done to stop that cycle that she's talking about, the cycle of repeat offending? Our numbers are 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can also hit pound 690 on your cell phone. And you can email us, bctoday@cbc.ca. Joining me now is Amanda McCormick. She's a criminologist at the University of the Fraser Valley and a research associate with the Center for Public Safety and Criminal Justice Research. Thanks for joining us. Good to have you.
Thank you for having me.
This is exactly the type of thing you look at in your research. What do you make of the comments from the Attorney General, from Vancouver Police saying we understand that public anger when it comes to repeat offenders?
Oh, I can absolutely see, the public's concern. My particular area of research focuses on gender-based violence. So looking at, the kind of case that happened the other day with sexual assault, intimate partner violence. And there are many concerns about just the system's inability to hold people accountable for their actions. So I can absolutely see where the public is coming from when they hear about, these cases where people have a history of offending. It's been reported to the police. The system has had an opportunity, but has failed to effectively intervene and unfortunately put people at further risk.
These cases tend to make the news. Statistically, how frequently do violent people accused of violent attacks repeatedly offend?
Well, there's not a clear answer on that, so I'm having to take the academic stance on this. It depends on the nature of the offense and the nature of the relationship between the individuals. So in the case that just happened with the sexual assault with strangulation, these are not typically stranger-based cases. These are cases where it's usually happening to women by a person that they know, whether it's an acquaintance or an intimate partner that's harming them. And so in those cases, obviously, we see a lot of repeat violence happening when it's occurring within that kind of relationship context. When it's coming to stranger violence, these are less common kinds of offenses, but of course they make the media. People are always fearful of these kinds of cases happening to them, even though statistically they're actually quite rare.
Okay, and I should say, of course, that this case is still before the courts, that it will go through that criminal process. And I appreciate you taking the academic approach as well. Now, the Attorney General referred to those changes that have already been made federally in the criminal code, so putting the onus on the person accused to show why they should be released on bail. And that has been in place now for more than a year. Has it had an impact?
I don't know that we have the statistics to be able to answer that at this point. Unfortunately, our justice system moves very, very slowly. Particularly in British Columbia, we have a process where police will do an investigation and then they will recommend charges. A lot of people don't understand that in BC, police themselves don't actually lay charges against people.
Right.
They do an investigation, they make a recommendation that then has to be reviewed by the Crown Counsel, and it's up to the Crown Counsel to decide whether they feel confident that case can go through the system. So, it's these days we're seeing it takes a year, maybe a couple of years, depending on the nature of the offense, before these cases go before court. So we just don't have that data at this point.
Okay. Do you feel that those changes are sufficient?
I mean, they're a step in the right direction. I know, my colleagues have done research looking at what we call prolific offenders. And so in British Columbia, we've seen data where we have people with over 100 previous interactions with the justice system. And, they're getting let out, of course, into the community or getting short sentences. And so, it's a step towards addressing these concerns. But of course, we have to balance that with the way that our system presumes that people are innocent until proven guilty. And so it's a very difficult balance to try to strike when it comes to respecting people's rights, but also protecting public safety.
Yeah, that's the crux of it, isn't it? Let's take some calls now. My guest is Amanda McCormick, criminologist at the University of the Fraser Valley and a research associate with the Center for Public Safety and Criminal Justice Research. We're asking you what needs to be done to stop the cycle of repeat offenses. Our numbers are 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can email to bctoday@cbc.ca. Trevor is calling us now from Agassiz. Hi, Trevor. What are your thoughts on repeat offenders?
Yeah, I think a lot of people want a simple solution. They want, you want to disappear these people, but we're not looking at the complex picture here with regard to society in general. And this is going to take decades to change. I was in Europe, and a lot of the structural stuff that we see here with regards to substance use, homelessness, it's just not visible because of a change in the way that society sees things. When it comes to repeat offenders, like violence just doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from years of failure. In general, it's opportunistic, or it's a crime of passion. And when it comes to repeat offenders, we need to look at what the aggravator was in each case and treat it as its own case, and offer the supports for people. Locking them away is an easy solution, but it doesn't solve our problems, right? Like, where are the support systems? Do these people have someone that is legitimately developing a relationship and following them? Instead of looking to punish them and catch them and lock them away, right? Like that's a big thing. And another thing is masculinity in general. We need to, as a society, look at what it means to be a man. The dominate and the sexual violence. All of that is bred into our culture, right? We need to change the way that we look at things. And I just like to just disappear people. Like I said, it's a simple solution, but I don't think it's solving anything.
You're getting to so many points that were raised by our guest yesterday too, Trevor. So reiterating the need for long-term solutions, getting to the root, and those are solutions. Looking at masculinity, having those discussions. And she was saying that takes years, and often those aren't the things that perhaps politicians look at as solutions. Really appreciate hearing from you. And that was Anne-Marie McDougall, our guest yesterday from Battered Women's Support Services Society. Trevor, thank you very much for the call. Great to hear from you. I want to talk about, Amanda, your research looks into gender violence. And when we spoke with Anne-Marie McDougall about this particular case, this alleged sexual assault this past Monday, there are many other cases that we could go through, but she mentioned that gender violence tends to be left out of that our ongoing political discussions around public safety. What do you think of that?
Yeah. Well, the Premier has now declared gender-based violence to be an epidemic in British Columbia. And so I think with that recognition, we're hoping to see action to follow. I think I agree wholeheartedly with everything that was said in the interview yesterday. And with what Trevor, he sounds like he's a very informed individual. What they're saying about getting ahead of the problem and prevention is really where we need to be focusing. People harm other people because harm has been done to them, and usually not very effectively addressed. We have huge rates of childhood trauma, and these are things that come around in the next several decades of that person's life, and result in people harming others. And so we need much more work at the prevention stage in childhood, early childhood education, with the school system, with learning about healthy relationships, addressing ways to communicate with other people in healthy ways, and addressing the traumas that people have experienced so that we don't see this cycle happening. So yes, absolutely. It is going to take decades before we see these outcomes in a positive way. And that is the challenge. When you're on a political cycle of, say, 5 years, you don't tend to have a long enough lens to be able to see the outcomes of the funding that you're putting into these kinds of programs. But, the research that's available speaks for itself. These programs are effective, and they do reduce rates going forward when you're addressing, the causes of violence at an earlier point.
Our next caller now, as we discuss repeat offenders and what's needed to stop the cycle, Justin is on the line in Victoria. Hi, Justin. Welcome.
Hi, how are you today?
I am fine. Yeah, what are your thoughts on what can be done to stop the cycle?
Well, I would say it's 100% to the judges. I would say our system is perfectly fine, but right now it's a race to the bottom, like in every aspect of everything, that's job creation program. The more the repeat offenders that they let out is more work that they have. And that kind of aspect needs to change, I think, because if you think a person who just raped somebody or running around with a machete and hacking people with it has any kind of rights, then there's something wrong, and that judge should be pulled off the system and find a new judge because that is just out to lunch.
Justin, I take your anger about this, but aren't judges doing their jobs if they are looking to the law and balancing the rights that everybody has?
No, that person does not have rights. That's what I'm saying. That person does not have rights, and I'm not angry. I'm just saying that that person does not have rights. If you're doing that kind of stuff, why would you say they have rights? It's that thought right there. It's that mentality of humans that we're getting in our own way, right? We're
what do you want to see from judges, Justin? What do you want to see from judges then?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't even say anything harsher or anything like that. It just has to be. It has to be something like if it's like that with the homeless that are on drugs or whatever, then yeah, it has to be a mandatory. It has to be a mandatory dry out. Like that's the only way. Like nobody in their right mind is going to go and take a machete and start threatening people. You know what I mean? So they're obviously not in their right mind. So the first thing you have to do is stabilize their mind. So
that ongoing conversation we're having as well about
that's right.
Involuntary treatment. Justin, thank you very much. A lot of points brought up there, looking to judges to make in terms of making those decisions. Why don't we talk about the rights question first, Amanda, and address that?
Well, yes. I mean, again, it's a balance, right? We have to protect public safety while at the same time presuming that people are innocent until proven guilty, and understanding, again, that, as Justin pointed out, people may not be in their right mind at the time that they are committing a criminal offense. And so in our system, we don't punish people for those behaviors when they're suffering from a mental disorder, for example, at the time that the offense was convicted or committed. So it's a balance again. But I just want to to mention, when we're talking about gender-based violence and the criminal justice system, we're not even getting to the point of judges in many of these cases. The criminal justice system is just simply not an effective way to be addressing gender-based violence. We have exceptionally low reporting rates when it comes to crimes like sexual assault or intimate partner violence. They're not coming forward and reporting these forms of violence to the police. And so then, we have very few of these cases making their way even to the court system. And so where we would like to see more resources being delivered would be to the community level, where people are seeking supports and opportunities for healing that maybe don't involve the criminal justice system pathway.
What is happening when someone is serving time to try and prevent recidivism?
Sure. Well, it depends on the nature of their sentence and whether they're, in a provincial jail or a federal custody center. The length of time that it takes to address these root causes of violence, it's not something that you can do effectively with a 12-week program. These are long-term programs that we need. So, regardless of whether you're in a provincial or federal setting, there will be some programs available to address whatever the underlying needs are. Whether they're effective depends on, again, how long that person is participating in the program. These are really complex issues that are often interrelated. Again, speaking of early childhood traumas that many of these individuals have experienced, we know that there's high rates of brain injury as well amongst incarcerated populations. We're talking about systemic discrimination experiences, particularly for Indigenous people. There's so many risks to unpack and try to address during the treatment that's being offered. It's really not a quick and easy thing to do.
Okay. Dave is up next now in Terrace. Hi, Dave. Your thoughts on what's needed to stop the cycle of repeat offenders?
I think your last caller there hit it basically right on the head. What I think he needed to highlight, though, is these guys that do these things don't care about the women they're assaulting's rights. But why do we go ahead and give a crap about their rights? I think this is ridiculous, such a ridiculous approach. But I really don't think being soft on it is going to help. And I like both one of your callers and your guest there said it's going to take decades. So in the meantime, our daughters, our sisters, and our mothers are cannon fodder for this. No, I think if we start coming down very harshly and start putting some people away in very uncomfortable places, that this message will get out to people. It's not fair to the girls in our society, and we need to stop pussyfooting around these things. This is disgusting what this person did. And I don't care if he was not in his right mind at the time. It still happened, and it was still him. He's got to go. He's got to go away for a long time. That could be your daughter. That could be your sister. That could be your mother. Anybody who's arguing for the side of, mental health, needs to really give it a rest and think about what they would do if this was their family member. It's gross.
Dave, thank you very much. And again, just to repeat that in this case, again, the allegations are yet to be tested in court. That point there about, in the meanwhile, as you try and go through and address the long-term issues, there are people who become victims. And when you hear the stories of victims, it's life-changing. Someone brought up the machete attack and reading in the news about the person whose life has been changed and lives with lasting injuries and impacts from that. How do you go about it? That's really, how do you balance that then? How do you make sure that the rights of victims are paid attention to?
Mm-hmm. I would say a lot of people, again, coming from the lens of a gender-based violence experience, are not finding any healing or real accountability through the criminal justice system. The criminal justice system takes that crime away from the individual who experienced it and makes it a crime against the state. And so, victims tend to feel very left behind by the systemic response. There are alternatives. Restorative justice, for example, can be used even in cases of violence. there's different ways that restorative justice can address the causes of violence, and it's a very victim-centered led approach where the victim is able to share how they were harmed by the experience, whether it's physical, mental, ongoing trauma. They can share how the experience harmed them, and they can share, what they would like to see happen in order to heal and move forward. So, in the province of BC, we have great restorative justice programs throughout the province, and they address a wide variety of criminal offending, and that does include neighborly disputes, but also violent offenses. For the most part, however, it does not address gender-based violence. We have a moratorium in this province that prevents these programs from being able to take on these kinds of cases. They are done effectively in other jurisdictions, and other countries are using restorative responses to gender-based violence and seeing some really positive outcomes where, you're repairing relationships and healing the victim. They're in a much better place after, particularly when compared to the criminal justice system experience.
And it's not a painful experience.
It is a painful experience because you're going through and reliving, what happened to you and what led you. It's the victim is sharing their perspective, but the person who perpetrated the harm is also asked to be accountable, and they're asked to really come to terms with why they did what they did and understand how this impacted the person that they committed the offense against. So it's a really genuine process. It's not a quick process. It's something that, could take a year of working through and unpacking how did we get to this place. But at the same time, there's often access to counseling happening. The perpetrator might agree to attend programming to address if it's substance use or, anger management issues. They can take these other kinds of resources at the same time and work through. So it's, a lot of people think it's this very sort of lighthearted response to offending, but it's actually not. If you talk to people who have gone through a restorative response to any form of offending, they'll tell you that it was a very meaningful experience for them, and it resulted in them being able to move forward and heal from what had happened to them.
My guest is Amanda McCormick, criminologist at the University of the Fraser Valley, research associate with the Center for Public Safety and Criminal Justice Research. An email from Lorraine. I agree with your last phone-in caller. Repeat sex offenders should never be allowed to go back to the streets to offend again. I agree their rights stop right there. Lorraine, thank you. BC Today at cbc.ca. We'll go to more of your calls, and we'll break for a commercial break for our TV audience, but we'll be back with you in 2 minutes from now. My guest again, Amanda McCormick at UFV. This is BC Today. Let's go now to James in Prince George. Hi, James.
Hi. How are you?
I am fine, thanks. And your thoughts on this conversation around how do we stop the cycle of repeat offending?
Yeah, and I've got a couple of points on this. And I think as a society, we really need to think about what we're doing. I would bet that it's been, at least 100 years since we've really had a hard look at what we were trying to accomplish with our justice system. Like, what are we actually trying to do? And there's a couple of aspects to that. Are we trying to punish people, or are we trying to fix people? And I don't think those things are mutually exclusive at this point. I think we need to have a hard look at what we do when somebody is committing a crime, of various seriousness, whether it's, some of the crimes we're talking about today, and determine whether, is this a person that we should try to help because they've obviously got a problem and they're not making good decisions, or they need guidance to get to where they need to be, or do we want to punish them? And if we are going to punish people and we can make that conscious decision, let's make it something that makes them never want to do it again. Let's make it so brutal that you do not ever want to commit that crime. You need to get the point across that crime is a serious thing and it needs to be punished, or if we have people that make mistakes, whether or not we want to fix them. And it should be up to the judges to decide that. But I think we need to have a hard look at the justice system overall and determine how we're going to actually implement this type of stuff, because the revolving door is not working.
It's time for that conversation.
Yes, absolutely.
Really good to hear from you as well, James. Thank you very much. That's James calling us from Prince George as we discuss what is needed to change or stop the cycle of repeat offending. And lots of emails coming in as well. You can send it to us, bctoday at cbc.ca. This is BC Today here on CBC. We have been asking you what is needed to stop the cycle of repeat offending. And my guest, Amanda McCormick, a criminologist at UFV. We heard as well from BC's Attorney General, Nikki Sharma. She's working on, adding other elements to that decision as to whether to grant bail. It's respect for the law and things like that. Would they be compounding, exacerbating factors? Would that help, do you think? Does that add anything to strengthening the bail system?
Well, we see, again, with gender-based violence, we see very few cases coming to the system in the first place. And so that's not even a conversation to be had about these types of cases. When you see that only 5% of sexual assault is being reported to the police, the bail question is very far down that line. Right. We need to do more, again, at the community level and at the preventative level to better address what's happening to people in our communities. To the point the several callers have made now about really wanting to see judges come down hard on these individuals. I mean, I agree very much from a treatment-oriented perspective. The longer somebody is serving a sentence, the more opportunities you really have to address those underlying causes. But at the same time, again, if you look at the statistics, our research actually shows restorative justice reduces recidivism amongst people going forward at greater rates than the criminal justice system does. So the criminal justice system is just not, for the most part, working well at holding people accountable and addressing those underlying causes of violence, and it means we need to look at other alternative ways of doing a better job.
So you'd agree it's time to look at this justice system again, have that hard conversation, as James was saying?
Yeah, I'm not sure if people are aware, but there's actually two inquiries that are happening right now. One in Canada, nationally. The Ombudsperson of Canada is conducting an investigation into the legal system's treatment of survivors of sexual violence. And simultaneously, we actually have our own review happening here in British Columbia, where there is a review happening of the criminal justice system's response to both intimate partner violence and sexual violence. And so I think that really speaks to there is recognition that the system is not working in these particular types of cases, and that we need to look at what other resources are needed, what other prevention is needed, what other alternatives do we have beyond the criminal justice system to better address gender-based violence in our society.
I really appreciate speaking with you today. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the time. Appreciate being here.
Amanda McCormick is a criminologist at the University of the Fraser Valley and research associate with the Center for Public Safety and Criminal Justice Research. Thank you as well to all of our callers and our emailers there. We'll get to more of your emails on that topic as we've had a lot of them come in. bctoday@cbc.ca is our address again. 12:33 now. You're with BC Today. I'm Michelle Elliott. And coming up, we will talk about the job search and ask you, what is the biggest challenge for you right now in looking for a job? Do you have some tips perhaps for job seekers? We'll have two employment experts taking your calls. Right now it's time for a CBC News Update. And here's Robert Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. 2 people have been taken to hospital in stable condition, and more than 4 dozen people have been displaced after a large apartment fire in Prince George. It broke out shortly before 6 o'clock this morning in the 3-story building near DP Todd Secondary. A fire has burnt at least half the building's roof, with substantial damage visible. The city of Vancouver says it will begin consolidating the memorial sites near the scene of the Lapu Lapu Festival attack that killed 11 people last month. It says 2 sites will be allocated for the memorials, one at 3rd Avenue and Fraser Street and a new one at Mountain View Cemetery. Filipino BC, which organized the Lapu Lapu event, says in a separate statement that people are still navigating immense grief, and an important part of collective healing is ensuring memorials are accessible and respected. And police say crime in downtown Vancouver has dropped since a specialized task force was deployed 3 months ago. The department says data collected between February 13th and May 13th shows serious violent crime, assaults, robberies, and commercial break-in enters have dropped when compared to last year. And now the forecast on the north coast, mainly sunny this afternoon with a high of 12, highs to 18 with a mix of sun and cloud in the Peace. In the central interior, including Prince George, some sun and cloud with a high of 16, highs up to 18 and mainly cloudy this afternoon in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, including Kelowna, a mix of sun and cloud with a high of 21. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria and the Fraser Valley, lots of sunshine this afternoon with highs around 19. That's your CBC News update from Vancouver.
Thank you very much, Rob. Rob Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. And another news story that we are certainly watching is the potential second strike at Canada Post. That could happen tomorrow, and it would be the second in just 6 months. There was a new offer from Canada Post yesterday, but it turned down the union's offer to delay that possible strike by 2 weeks so that its bargainers could look over that company's latest offer. Now, as the clock ticks down, we've been asking you to share your thoughts on the possible second strike at Canada Post. Dina wrote us, anyone who totally discounts the validity and need for some portion of mail delivery is thinking internally. There are elderly people, or even my sister who's 60, who does not do online banking or other sensitive bill payment processing. I sometimes send birthday cards by mail to friends if we can't meet up in person, and regularly send various holiday greeting cards to elderly aunts who don't use email. During the last Canada Post strike, the needs for the service to process donations and other government payments also became apparent. Reducing home delivery to 2 to 3 times a week may be a solution, but the repeated threat of a strike will move business for couriers away from Canada Post. It should be recognized as an essential service, so it's never allowed to completely cease in the event of a strike. Aaron writes, I'm so tired of these strikes. Both sides need to get it together and meet in the middle with the help of an arbitrator. Either side is not going to get everything they want. And Lisa writes, about birthday cards, I tend to disagree. I send and receive cards and letters all the time, as do many folks. Also, artist trading cards are huge worldwide, and we send them by mail. I'm sure there are other segments of the population that still use it. Thanks for your emails. BC Today at cbc.ca. .37 now. This is BC Today. We're live on CBC Radio, CBC Television, live streaming as well. And I'm Michelle Elliott. Thanks for being here with us. Okay, we're going to talk job hunting now because the market could be getting pretty crowded. If you're hoping to get an edge, okay, students are letting out for the summer. We've heard about the layoffs and uncertainty amid the U.S.-Canada trade war. And we watched the unemployment rate creeping up. Now, we have some help on hand this half hour, and you can call in too. Are you looking for a job? And what is the biggest challenge right now for job seekers? Call in with your questions, or if you have a piece of advice you'd like to share, you can give us a call. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, or you can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. You can also email bctoday@cbc.ca. Now, check this out. Last week, Mosaic held a job fair in downtown Vancouver. The lineup went around the corner. The event was packed. CBC's Michelle Gomez spoke to some of the people waiting in line.
One is kind of struggling right now, especially I think with the world's economic situation kind of has made things worse.
It is very tough because the market is very competitive, and unless you have connections, you wouldn't get in.
Trying to make our ends meet and also trying to contribute to the society.
And again, you can give us a call if you're looking for a job. What's the biggest challenge for you right now? If you're considering looking for a new job as well. And if you have some advice to share as well. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. I'm pleased to welcome my two guests for this. David Lee is Director of Employment, Language and Social Enterprise with Mosaic. Emily McNamara is Senior Recruitment Consultant with the McNeill-Nakamoto Recruitment Group. Welcome to you both. Thanks for being here with us.
Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you. Welcome, David. I watched that footage from the job fair, and I was quite stunned to see the long lineup and just how busy it was inside. What was the turnout?
Michelle, we had over 2,700 job seekers attend that day.
and we knew there was going to be significant demand. We had to cap the number of people who could register. We had over 5,000 people register, and
Oh my
2,700
goodness.
people showed up that day.
And have you seen that grow then over the years?
There's definitely been growth, especially when we came out of the pandemic. So 2 years ago, after 2 years of having to do things in a virtual format, we held our first back in person job fair, saw similar lineups. This time we held it in New Westminster, the same level of growth of more people coming out for that in-person opportunity to meet with employers.
And what were people telling you in terms of, what their situation was and what they were looking for?
It was really varied. We, see people anywhere from students or international students who are here on a temporary residency basis to long-term residents and people who may have been out of the workforce for a variety of reasons. And because of economic conditions, other circumstances in their lives, seeing the need to return to the workforce, people who are already working and looking for supplemental income because they need an additional source to make things, make ends meet.
Now, Emily, you work with people who are getting started on a job hunt or in the middle of one and need some advice. What are you seeing in terms of demand for your services?
Yeah, it's really difficult starting a job search when you don't know how to start, really. So a lot of people will ask us about how does my resume measure up? How do I act when I go for an interview? And then hopefully we get to the offer negotiation stage with people, but we can help walk them through that, which if you haven't done that and you've been out of the workforce for a little while can be intimidating as well.
Who tends to contact you? Would it be students or as we've been hearing, someone who may be thinking of a supplemental income? Who are the people who contact you?
Our recruitment agency focuses on corporate office positions. So we fill a lot of roles within finance and accounting, administration, human resources, operations, sales and marketing. So typically we're working with candidates who have specialties within those areas.
And experience.
Some with experience, some without, some new arrivals to Canada, which is really difficult when you're trying to secure your first position within Canada and you might not have Canadian work experience on your resume.
Yeah, I know about that with my parents when we first arrived, for sure. And so before I go to our callers here, we're asking you to call in with your questions about the job hunt, what's some advice you're looking for, or if you have some advice to share. Love to hear from you. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can email us to bctoday@cbc.ca. And I'm pleased to welcome here my two guests who are taking your calls. Emily McNamara is a senior recruitment consultant at the McNeill-Nakamoto Recruitment Group, and David Lee is director of employment at Mosaic. And Emily, I'll just ask you first, so what's the first step then? What is the first bit of advice you have for someone who's looking for a job?
Well, I think making sure that your resume and your LinkedIn profile are really updated well. Actually, one tip for folks who have arrived, who have recently arrived, a lot of times I see resumes that have really good experience and really good relevant industry experience, but employers in Vancouver may not know that because they don't understand or recognize the name of the company from another country.
Right.
So having sometimes an italicized little description of what that company does or did from your home country. For example, if you're applying for a role in the oil and gas sector here in Vancouver or in Alberta, and you've worked in the oil and gas sector, so you have industry experience, letting employers know that is really valuable. So really refining your resume for every job that you're applying for.
Okay, and ensuring you have those details to illustrate that it's relevant.
Yeah.
I saw you nodding there, David.
Yeah, absolutely. What Emily said is really important, taking the perspective of a prospective employer and making sure that you're translating things into something that's going to be directly accessible, relevant for them to understand. How is your experience, whether it's prior to arriving in Canada or in Canada, directly relevant for what they're looking for. I think the other piece that I would add is just having the basic research on what you know is the demand, what people are looking for locally, and being able to demonstrate that knowledge, that research that you've done in your interviews, in your cover letters that accompany your resumes.
Let's go to a call now, and let's head to Fort St. John. And Dan is on the line. You have some advice, Dan?
Yes, I do have a little bit of friendly advice. That's not for everybody.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll just relate my experience here real quick. In March of 2020, I lost a pretty good job there when the pandemic hit. And after the initial craziness was over, I started sending out resumes on some of the job sites, electronically sending resumes. And I literally sent out a couple of hundred resumes and didn't get a single response back.
Wow.
So you know what? I said, I'm taking my resume and I'm going to identify companies that I think I might like to work for. And it doesn't work for all companies. Like some companies will only accept electronic resumes. But if you're applying at a small or medium-sized business, go in with your resume, introduce yourself, tell them I'm looking for a job. And at the same time, you're also displaying some of the soft skills that some employers are looking for.
Absolutely.
In my case, electronically, they would have shown that I graduated high school in 1978. So they know that I'm a fossil, basically, right? but if I go in there in person and I'm personable, make a good impression, and I was getting on-the-spot interviews more often than not, actually.
Wow. No, I think they could tell you had experience. Let's put it that way, right? Dan, it's amazing. I'm sorry to hear you lost your job during the pandemic, but it sounds like you really picked yourself up off the floor.
Well, I've had a couple of jobs that I didn't really want to do during the pandemic.
Right.
But I have found my forever job now. I'm 63 years old. You got to put yourself out there, and it's not for everybody. But I've known people that are not, they're kind of introverted, have taken that approach. And after, 6 or 8 or 10 attempts, you do refine your pitch. You do get better at it. And employers actually, all that experience on your resume doesn't show through on paper, but it might show through in person.
What a great piece of advice. So glad to hear from you, Dan. All the best to you, okay?
You bet.
That's Dan in Fort St. John. Yes. So, all right, there's LinkedIn. Do people look at LinkedIn? Do companies actually read and open that email with your resume?
Yes, absolutely. LinkedIn's very important. So having an updated profile, LinkedIn creates an algorithm that will bring jobs to your attention that matches your background.
There's that. Yeah.
So it's important to list out the keywords in terms of the positions that you've held.
Yeah, that's a good tip.
And so, yes.
But that in person. And when would you suggest doing that?
It's a good, it obviously was working. I think it's a good idea. I think that there's a place. I think some companies have a very stringent HR policy where it won't work for every employer. But yes, you really create a three-dimensional resume of yourself when you're walking in with your CV and you're saying this, especially if you're applying for relevant positions.
Right. David, what should be the approach? Say you walk in. I've heard this from a friend whose son was in university, had sent out some resumes by email as well, didn't hear back, but actually walked into a restaurant and was told on the spot, like, can you start tomorrow? How should you present yourself as you walk in and try to have that face-to-face interaction?
Well, I think it always helps to know something about the establishment, the employer that you're approaching. I'm also a big fan of people being proactive and going to the place of business. Many companies, they host events, and to attend those, now, absolutely have things like your contact information, resume on hand, but also be prepared just to have the conversation. If you start with offering up that you know something about that company, and then you can get into a more natural conversation about understanding what's challenging for that employer right now, and then you can bring in what you have to offer What Dan described is fantastic, and I loved Emily's term of a 3D resume.
Yeah.
The way to engage people person to person is what leaves an impression, more so than having your resume and being that being the first thing that you hand over to someone.
Oh, interesting. You agree with that?
I would, and I think that there are ways to make that impression as well on paper with your personal branding in terms of the font that you use. And if you decide to have some color on your resume, there's a way that you can present yourself and sort of show off your personal brand, if you will.
My apologies. My phone just went off there. I forgot to mute it for the program. That's really great because in some cases, and that kind of the font and the different colors, that's acceptable? That's not considered unprofessional?
I don't think so. I think a resume is like a magazine article, and the more appealing you make it to look at and to read through, the longer somebody will stay in it. And that's what you want, is an employer to flip to the second page. Page 1 is always your most valuable real estate, so you want to put everything that's really critical up front, but you want to keep them, reading and bring them into page 2 so that they want to call you.
I love that. You're really good with the terminology there. Keep them reading, keep them interested. Go to page 2. That's like writing a book. Absolutely. Let's go to Duncan in Victoria now. And yeah, your thoughts, or do you have a question or a piece of advice on job hunting, Duncan?
Hello?
Hi, Duncan.
Hi. Sorry. I guess I'm a recent grad from Alberta. I moved to Victoria to be with family. However, the kind of work I was looking at doing has a political element, which means in moving here, I've sort of burned those bridges I built up in my university program. So I guess my question becomes, how do you get your foot in the door to make those positions when you're applying for a job that is somewhat political, and you never know if the job you're applying for is simply being put up there because they've already got an internal candidate and they're never going to look at your application to begin with.
A couple of things there. So one is what happens if there's an internal candidate, but it sounds like you had created a network for yourself in Alberta, which you don't have in Victoria, obviously.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, great question. Duncan, if you want to just hold the line, let me put that to Emily. How do you start over, essentially?
That's difficult. Yeah, I think networking is probably going to be the first step, especially in a new city. Possibly if there's an opportunity to provide some volunteering where you can get involved. It's a lower risk when it's a volunteer position so that people can see who you are and what you can do. But again, back to LinkedIn, perhaps connecting with folks within that community, within that industry or space online, and then attending some industry events if that's possible in your area of expertise.
Yeah, well, you're in Victoria, so it sounds like a good spot for political work, Duncan. Right where the legislature is.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's a lot of groundwork, isn't it? That you're not sure if it's going to lead to something, but it's building. It's sort of building that. Yeah, your thoughts on that, David?
Yeah, I think the networking thing is really key, and it can be at first being much broader than a person might think would be helpful to a job search. Being ready to share with family and friends, and there's different types of events that can be happening very regularly to just where you have common interests. Doesn't necessarily have to be specifically about the job or the field, but that's an opportunity to reach out to people and mention to them, I'm new in this city. This is the type of experience I have. This is the type of work I'm looking for. And then as you go, you can get more and more refined about who you reach out to for those in-person coffee appointments, or sometimes it is reaching out to people on LinkedIn. So it's a wider approach, and then gradually, week after week, you can become more refined about who you will network with.
The job hunt is a job in itself. Sounds like we have an email from Andrew who writes, 3 years ago, I went to Work BC and I received fantastic support. The one super big thing I would recommend is that you should go as soon as you think you will need to start looking. Okay, don't hesitate because you have to make an appointment to see a counselor and you may need to wait. Go to Work BC. Okay, that's a resounding acknowledgement there. Recommendation from Andrew. Thank you very much, Andrew. And Doc is on the line now in Coquitlam. Hi, Doc. Your thoughts? Do you have a piece of advice on job seeking?
Yeah. So in reference to a previous caller who said that he had sent out hundreds of resumes and didn't even have a response, no acknowledgement. My brother went through this for 2 years. And even with companies that were requesting resumes, no acknowledgement. My comment to potential employers is that after that, I looked at them as a business very differently. I would not recommend them. I would not go to them. I thought that was rude and unprofessional. So the rest of the world sees employers through the eyes of potential employees. And what I found was the companies that responded to him, even with an autoresponder, I responded to them by thinking that's a company that I might do business with, that I might encourage people to look for jobs with.
Yeah.
But it's just an eye-opener for employers that they need to pay attention to how they treat potential employees in terms of their business.
Because that's dealing with the public. Yeah, that's your image as well. Doc, really good point.
Thank you. Their marketing.
Yeah. Thank you so much. That's a really, really interesting point, perhaps to not dismiss those applications because that's part of how you are viewed in the public as well. That's your marketing. I have 2 minutes here. Why don't I just ask you for general advice? And we are heading into the summer, students perhaps looking for work now, and the ongoing job hunts, of course. But what's your piece of advice for people as they head out?
I think getting your resume ready, your LinkedIn profile ready, getting out to, if applying in person is what you're choosing to do, especially if you're looking for a position in the retail or hospitality sectors, that can be really valuable.
It's like an audition, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
Spring and fall have traditionally been peak times for hiring. So getting everything ready and starting to ramp up for the summer and then the peak fall season, we're starting to see more positions come into the Vancouver market now, which is really reassuring. So hopefully everybody will have a good success.
Yeah, fingers crossed for everybody. And what about you, David? One piece of advice.
Well, I would like to do a +1 on the comment from Andrew about Work BC. Work BC, provincially funded program, federally funded program, supports any and all job seekers, locations across the province. And Mosaic operates 4 of those Work BC centers. It's not to be afraid to reach out to those services that are available, which can really boost up your networking, really give you the opportunity to have someone as both an accountability buddy in terms of your job search, but as well give you some real good tips around how do we approach specific employers.
Really great to have you both. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.